everyone. Oh, you're very lively. Lively audience. It's good. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to who we all are. I know you did that very briefly, but I'd quite like to do it again. My name is Sue Holloway, and I'm the Director of Local Government and Social Housing at Northgate Public Services. And I have two of my partners here today who very kindly said that they will help me by kicking off some of our conversation. Because the first thing I'd say is that I really want this to be as interactive as possible. It'd be great if you could contribute, be helpful if you're happy to kind of throw your ideas in, put your thoughts out there. Come in the room, that would be great. Welcome.
Sorry.
No, you're dead welcome. Very happy to have you in here. In fact, perfect, Richard. Bear in mind, I'm going to ask you a question later.
Right, okay.
Just to set you on edge as you sit down. All you've missed so far is I've said my name, Sue Holloway from Northgate, Director of Local Government and Social Housing. My colleagues that are here, Leslie is from Guinness and Northern Counties, and Leslie has a very posh title, which is the Service Resort Performance and Improvement Manager.
Well, actually, since we last spoke, it's changed.
Which is only on Thursday.
I think you got my home title, it doesn't matter.
What's the new title? That would be correct.
Head of Service.
Head of Service Improvement, so there you go. Congratulations. I'm going to be careful now. Go on. What's your title?
My title is the same as it was on Wednesday when I saw it. I'm the ICT manager at North Somerset Housing.
Perfect. And as I say, the reason I've got Ron and Leslie, they very kindly said that they're going to talk a little bit about what they're doing, just maybe to get our session kicked off in terms of how we're talking. So, the role that I've got at Northgate is looking forward in terms of what we do with our services, what's our strategic direction. One of the things is about horizon scanning. There was an article in our local paper a few weeks ago where they spoke about Northgate, which is lovely, but they actually sort of picked up on the fact that we do horizon scanning in my area, and it had a 10-year-old with some binoculars on the front of the paper going, Northgate has 100 people scanning the horizon, which was very frightening really, just in terms of we do other things, really we do. But part of that is perhaps so I can let you understand that I've got quite a selfish objective in terms of why I'm here today. I'd like to walk out the room in 40 minutes with a better understanding of what some of you are doing today in this area, the approaches that you're taking, and perhaps a better idea of what some of the challenges are in terms of, you know, from what Richard's spoken about earlier, and I'm going to ask you the question later. I think there's quite a long way down the line in terms of use of intelligence and information to manage the business effectively. But I know that as organisations, we're not all at that same point. So what's stopping us from getting there? What are the challenges? And how can organisations like Northgate help you, and Visual Metrics help you to take you forward in that journey? Just so I know again, in terms of the room that we've got today, how many of you know Northgate? Oh, big chunk. Ooh. How many of you are Northgate clients then? Good number again. And how many of you are not Northgate clients again? Fair number. So apologies to Northgate clients. I'm going to give a couple of bits of information about who we are and what we do, just so that people understand perhaps where we're coming from with this. As a company, we provide software and services into a range of organisations. The focus of the bit of business that I'm in is public sector. So everything we do is around public sector, public service delivery. We've traditionally been known as an application provider, and I guess again that's interesting. How many of you here use Northgate in terms of application provision? Quick hands up on that. Okay, and services? That's interesting, because yeah, of course you do there, North Somerset. Our change, I would say, as an organisation is that we have been moving forwards, moving alongside our applications business, which will always be the core part of what we do, but extending that in terms of services support and service delivery. We've grown a lot. I joined 9 years ago and there were 1,100 of us at that stage, and we're now at over 10,000, so really big growth. A lot of that has been through acquisition, a lot of that through organic growth. And you know, in terms of the title that I gave this workshop, operational efficiency, good enough for less. You know, why is Northgate entitled to talk about operational efficiency? Some of the services that we provide are focused on transformation and helping organisations to get operational efficiency. We've got some really effective operational managers who work alongside organisations. They do that completely on a risk-reward basis, so if we don't achieve results, if we don't achieve outcomes, we don't get paid. And that's given us some quite sort of hard experience in terms of what matters in terms of driving operational efficiency. One more thing in terms of who we work with. I think quite a lot of organisations here are housing. How many are housing organisations? Yeah, quite strong. Local authorities. So I think the room is primarily sort of exactly where we work. Just to touch on some things that you may not know that we do. Okay, hands up again. Anyone in the room who's either themselves or friend or relative had a baby in the last few years? Okay, quite a number of you. You may not know that Northgate has been supportive in that baby in terms of every baby that's born has a hearing test within the first 3 days of their birth. The hearing test, in terms of all the technology around the hearing test, in terms of the assessment and analysis of that information, in terms of what happens with it, that's all provided by Northgate. In fact, in Northern Ireland, we're just about to run a contract where we support the clinicians as well. So the people who, hold the babies, do the test, are all supplied by Northgate. And that's a really interesting one for us, because in terms of, we were talking risk before, our risk assessment has been the first time we've had to do a qualification for what happens if you drop the baby. So, very unusual one for Northgate to take on board. So, those of you who've been touched by Northgate, anybody in terms of themselves or a partner been into hospital within the last few years? Again, a few of you in the room. What you may not know is our systems are used in every hospital across the UK in terms of keeping information on what happens, health episode statistics. And again, that information is used, analysed to help sort of predict the strategy, the needs, a lot of what you're saying in terms of identifying future needs. That's Northgate supporting that. Very last one, got to be honest on this one. Who in here has had a speeding ticket? Ever. You've all been touched by Northgate as well. But that's through your door, that little envelope through your door, we've done it for you. And sadly, even working for Northgate, there is no mechanism to remove yourself from that. I give you that background just because I would hope that it would perhaps set out where we're coming from, what we do, and maybe just make you think a little bit differently in terms of some of the services and certainly some of the solutions that we're providing. So that's where we're coming from, and that's what we do. Before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions because this is getting into the crux of our delivery here. In terms of, we're talking about performant public services. So I want to set the context of the discussion with a few questions. First question I'm going to ask you is, how many of you actually see your budgets increasing over the next few years? Oh, surprise, no answer. Okay, how many of you actually see your budgets decreasing over the next few years? Virtually everybody's. But quite a few where you think it's going to stay the same. Those of you that see that things are getting worse, let's have a show of hands on the percentage. So by about 5%. Okay, a few of you. 10%. A couple of you. More than 20%. 15? More than 15? So interesting, because I think in this room then we're looking at approximately 10% in terms of having 10% less ability to spend over the next few years. Okay, let's bear that in mind and think alongside it. How many of you think that your customers are going to start wanting less, lowering their expectations, being less bothered about the services that you deliver? Any hands up for that one? Nobody. How many of you think that your customers are quite the reverse from that, have got increasing expectations, demanding more, wanting better service? Hands up on that one? Yeah, again, everybody in the room. So there we end up with a dilemma in terms of where we are today. We know that we've got to deliver much, much more in terms of what our customers are expecting, the services that we have to provide. But we're doing that in a context of having far less to spend. Now that means that we've got to get cleverer in terms of how we do it. We need to do things different ways. We need to change the way that we work. It'd be good for me just to get a couple of feedback from you in terms of what sort of things are you thinking about when you're facing this dilemma, when you've got less to spend, when you've got more to do. What does it make you think about doing differently? Where do you think you're going to get, how do you think you're going to get your savings and your efficiencies? What sort of things are you doing within your organisations? Anybody prepared to give me one of those?
Better procurement.
Sorry?
Procurement of services.
Better procurement, perfect.
Self-service.
Self-service, spot on.
Shared service.
Shared services, absolutely. That's a fair example. I think that's exactly the sort of thing that we're looking at. Any CIPFA members in the room? Oh, right, perfect. You can tell me whether this next slide is true then. So if you look at CIPFA analysis in terms of... No, you can't tell me because you probably can't see it. In terms of likely costs and efficiencies, CIPFA did some research looking at how are people going to achieve this? What are they going to be doing differently? And if you look at, what have we just said? Shared services, we said. More collaboration with others, I think, comes into shared services. Reducing staff, I think we're seeing that right throughout our sector at the moment, so we're seeing those sort of differences. Reducing our back office, I think that sort of comes through in what you said. But look at the one that sort of most people think that they're going to do. It's all about redesign of public services. Now, how do you know the ways in which you should redesign your public services? How do you set your strategy in terms of what you should be doing? I think the conversations that we've had this morning have set some really good background and backdrop in terms of the environment that we're working in, the things we have to think about, and then starting to look towards the creation of the strategy and the execution of the strategy. But I thought it would be really helpful to actually start to share some examples in terms of what some of the partners that we're working with have looked at in terms of performance management specifically, because that's a core part of this. How do you know that you're achieving your outcomes? What are your outcomes? How do you know you're achieving them? How do you know that you're delivering what you said you would deliver? And so for the purpose of this, I thought it would be great to get a quick introduction, about 5–10 minutes. Gordon's going to talk in terms of what you're doing at North Somerset Housing, and Leslie's going to be talking about the approach that Northern Counties have done. And for me, what I would hope is that would just give a flavour in terms of what a couple of different organisations, the road they've already gone down, what it's kind of meant to them, what they've achieved, and perhaps some of the challenges along the way. With that, I'm going to hand over to Leslie, who's going to do the first introduction.